Let's go ahead and continue our tour of these tools by hitting up the inflate brush. Now the inflate brush will take the pixels or the polygons and inflate them towards us like a balloon. So let me go ahead and just show you that. All right, so they just push towards whatever surface they're aimed at. Okay, once again, we can hold down control and we can push inwards to create craters and that kind of stuff. Amplify is similar to that, but it takes whatever effect you've applied and does just that. It amplifies it, makes it sharper. So we have ridges here that we are now amplifying, giving them more contrast, more detail. So if you work like I do and you do very soft strokes, you can then go by and amplify those details if you need to. Now fill will then take areas. Let me go ahead and see if I can find an area right here, and then fill that area in like water. Okay, so as you see here, I'm just filling up this area. A repeat is good for using textures. So when you have like scales or bumps you want to draw, you can then load up some kind of preset here or an alpha to your brush tip, and then you can go ahead and repeat that like so. And we already talked about scrape. Now let's go ahead and hop over to erase. Erase will try its best to go back to the way things were. All right, so we started off with the sphere, and I can go ahead and erase all this detail down back to where it was on this level. Mask is very important because it gives you the ability to prevent things from happening to certain parts of your model. So let's say, for example, you want to pull out maybe a bump here or a ridge, but you want to leave the surrounding areas alone. So I'll go ahead and increase the size of the brush. I'll paint the mask like so. Then I can grab a tool. Let's say I grab inflate, and I can inflate just this area. And I'm inflating over it now, but I'm not really touching anything that's in the mask. And when I'm done, I can hit clear mask. See that? Let me put the mask back on by hitting undo to show you that we can also flip the mask. So we can invert it. So what's selected will be unselected. And now I can go ahead and fill in the rest. So now this is masked and this is not masked. And I can go ahead and inflate or use any of the other tools to change the way that looks. You can also hide a mask and show things that are masked. So let me go ahead and clear that. Now, elsewhere in the course, I'll talk about baking objects. What that simply means is taking all of this detail that we have here and cooking it or baking it onto a texture map so that it can be applied on a lower resolution mesh. Very handy for things like video games. Because as I said before, eventually you'll run into millions of polygons, and trying to animate millions of polygons, really not a good idea. So you can bake it down onto a lower res geometry. Now let's go ahead and talk briefly about some of the settings that we have. On our tools, we have the ability to work with things like a fall off, which determines how that brush looks when a stroke is drawn. Let me go ahead and just show you real fast. All right, so we have a regular stroke drawn here. And what we can do with the fall off is we can go ahead and take these values and we can go ahead and change them. All right. So as you see here, we can frame everything in our little graph here if we need to. I can go ahead and hit control and I can add more points and I can move them and I can change the profile that I'm going to draw with. All right. So let me go ahead and show you the brush now. We get a little preview. So let me actually just step down a level or two, because you can see my computer starting to lock up when I'm showing you this. And look at the stroke now. All right, so it has a little bit of a dip in there because the profile has a dip. We can also paint with symmetry and choose which axis we want to work on. So you can draw an eye on one side and it will be mirrored onto the other side. Very, very cool. So as you can see here, there's quite a few settings available to your brushes. Your brush size is right here. All right, let me go ahead and just choose another brush like pull. We have our brush size and we have our pressure, how hard that effect would be applied. So if we were to pull with a little bit of pressure, we get this kind of result. And if I increase the pressure quite a bit, we get a much more pronounced result. All right. Now, steady stroke is really handy when you are using a regular mouse. Say I'm using a Wacom tablet. So steady stroke will allow the cursor to move ahead and then the mouse can follow. And it can help you create some very nice strokes. And spacing gives us the ability to change the spacing in between each stamp here that we have. So for example, if I increase the percentage, you see that I'm drawing different stamps all over the place. Let me turn steady stroke off. You see, every time you draw, you're simply repeating the brush very close to each other. And when I increase the spacing, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 different instances of this brush stroke, as opposed to reducing it and having the illusion of one brush stroke when we're just repeating the stroke millions and millions of times. And let's go ahead and talk about the buildup. The buildup gives us the ability, when we go ahead and stroke, to determine how far up it's going to build on the next stroke. I'll go ahead and reduce this. And you see it's going to take a little longer for us to build up to that same level. We can slowly build these strokes up. And of course, we can always invert. And we're pushing in, same as holding down Control. So that is a look at the many tools that you'll have inside of your sculpting workflow. You're all going to start off with increasing or decreasing the amount of pixels or polygons you're dealing with to create more and more detail. Once again, always start with the least amount and slowly work your way up. All right, so in the next lesson, I'll show you a quick example of how you might want to start a sculpt of a pumpkin.